Day 13 from the Bible in a Year Challenge is going to come from Genesis 45 through 47, Psalm 7, and Matthew 13. Genesis 45. Joseph reveals his identity. Joseph could stand it no longer. "Out, all of you," he cried out to his attendants. He wanted to be alone with his brothers when he told them who he was. Then he broke down and wept aloud. His sobs could be heard throughout the palace, and the news was quickly carried to Pharaoh's palace. "I am Joseph," he said to his brothers. "Is my father still alive?" But his brothers were speechless. They were stunned to realize that Joseph was standing there in front of them. "Come over here," he said. So they came closer, and he said again, "I am Joseph, your brother whom you sold into Egypt. But don't be angry with yourselves that you did this to me, for God did it. He sent me here ahead of you to preserve your lives. These 2 years of famine will grow to 7, during which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. God has sent me here to keep you and your families alive so that you will become a great nation. Yes, it was God who sent me here, not you. And he has made me a counselor to Pharaoh, manager of his entire household and ruler over all Egypt. Hurry, return to my father and tell him, 'This is what your son Joseph says. God has made me master over all the land of Egypt. Come down to me right away. You will live in the land of Goshen, so you can be near me with all your children and grandchildren, your flocks and herds and all that you have. I will take care of you there, for there are still 5 years of famine ahead of us. Otherwise you and your household will come to utter poverty.' Then Joseph said, 'You can see for yourselves, and so can my brother Benjamin, that I really am Joseph. Tell my father how I am honored here in Egypt. Tell him about everything you have seen, and bring him to me quickly.' Weeping with joy, he embraced Benjamin, and Benjamin also began to weep. Then Joseph kissed each of his brothers and wept over them, and then they began talking freely with him. Pharaoh invites Jacob to Egypt. The news soon reached Pharaoh. 'Joseph's brothers have come.' Pharaoh was very happy to hear this, and so were his officials. Pharaoh said to Joseph, 'Tell your brothers to load their pack animals and return quickly to their homes in Canaan. Tell them to bring your father and all their families and to come here to Egypt to live. Tell them Pharaoh will assign to you the very best territory in the land of Egypt. You will live off the fat of the land. And tell your brothers to take wagons from Egypt to carry their wives and little ones and to bring your father back. Don't worry about your belongings, for the best of all the land of Egypt is yours.' So the sons of Jacob did as they were told. Joseph gave them wagons as Pharaoh had commanded, and he supplied them with provisions for the journey. And he gave each of them new clothes, but to Benjamin he gave 5 changes of clothes and 300 pieces of silver. He sent his father 10 donkeys loaded with the good things of Egypt, and 10 donkeys loaded with grain and all kinds of other food to be eaten on his journey. So he sent his brothers off, and as they left, he called after them, 'Don't quarrel along the way!' And they left Egypt and returned to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan. 'Joseph is still alive,' they told him, 'and he is ruler over all the land of Egypt.' Jacob was stunned at the news. He couldn't believe it. But when they had given him Joseph's message, and when he saw the wagons loaded with the food sent by Joseph, his spirit revived. Then Jacob said, 'It must be true. My son Joseph is alive. I will go and see him before I die.' Chapter 46. Jacob's journey to Egypt. So Jacob set out for Egypt with all his possessions, and when he came to Beersheba, he offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. During the night, God spoke to him in a vision. 'Jacob, Jacob,' he called. 'Here I am,' Jacob replied. 'I am God,' the voice said, 'the God of your father. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will see to it that you will become a great nation there. I will go with you down to Egypt, and I will bring your descendants back again, but you will die in Egypt with Joseph at your side.' So Jacob left Beersheba, and his sons brought him to Egypt. They carried their little ones and wives in the wagons Pharaoh had provided for them. They brought their livestock too, and all the belongings they had acquired in the land of Canaan. Jacob and his entire family arrived in Egypt, sons and daughters, granddaughters and grandsons, and all his descendants. These are the names of the Israelites, the descendants of Jacob, who went with him to Egypt. Reuben was Jacob's oldest son. The sons of Reuben were Hanoch, Palu, Hezron, and Carmi. The sons of Simeon were Jemuel, Jamin, Ohad, Jachin, Zohar, and Shaul. Shaul's mother was a Canaanite woman. The sons of Levi were Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. The sons of Judah were Er, Onan, Shelah, Perez, and Zerah. But Er and Onan had died in the land of Canaan. The sons of Perez were Hezron and Hamuel. The sons of Issachar were Tola, Puah, Jashub, and Shimron. The sons of Zebulun were Sarad, Elon, and Jaleel. These are the sons of Jacob who were born to Leah in Paddan Aram, along with their sister Dinah. In all, Jacob's descendants through Leah numbered 33. The sons of Gad were Zephon, Haggai, Shunai, Ezbon, Eri, Arodi, and Areli. The sons of Asher were Imnah, Ishvi, and Beriah. Their sister was named Sarah. Beriah's sons were Heber and Malchiel. These 16 were descendants of Jacob through Zilpah, the servant given to Leah by her father Laban. The sons of Jacob's wife Rachel were Joseph and Benjamin. Joseph's sons, born in the land of Egypt, were Manasseh and Ephraim. Their mother was Asenath, daughter of Potiphar, priest of Heliopolis. Benjamin's sons were Bela, Becher, Ashbel, Jerah, Naaman, Ehi, Rosh, Muppim, Huppim, and Ard. These 14 were the descendants of Jacob and his wife Rachel. The son of Dan was Hushim. The sons of Naphtali were Jazil, Guni, Jezer, and Shillem. These 7 were the descendants of Jacob through Bilhah, the servant given to Rachel by her father Laban. So the total number of Jacob's direct descendants who went with him to Egypt, not counting his sons' wives, was 66. Joseph also had 2 sons who had been born in Egypt. So altogether there were 70 members of Jacob's family in the land of Egypt. Jacob's family arrives in Goshen. Jacob sent Judah ahead to meet Joseph and get directions to the land of Goshen. And when they all arrived there, Joseph prepared his chariot and traveled to Goshen to meet his father. As soon as Joseph arrived, he embraced his father and wept on his shoulder for a long time. Then Jacob said to Joseph, "Now let me die, for I have seen you with my own eyes and know you are still alive." And Joseph said to his brothers and to all their households, "I'll go and tell Pharaoh that you have all come from the land of Canaan to join me. And I will tell him, these men are shepherds and livestock breeders. They have brought with them their flocks and herds and everything they own. So when Pharaoh calls for you and asks you about your occupation, tell him, we have been livestock breeders from our youth, as our ancestors have been for many generations." When you tell him this, he will let you live here in the land of Goshen, for shepherds are despised in the land of Egypt. Chapter 47. Jacob blesses Pharaoh. So Joseph went to see Pharaoh and said, "My father and brothers are here from Canaan. They came with all their flocks and herds and possessions, and they are now in the land of Goshen." Joseph took 5 of his brothers with him and presented them to Pharaoh. Pharaoh asked them, "What is your occupation?" And they replied, "We are shepherds, like our ancestors. We have come to live here in Egypt, for there is no pasture for our flocks in Canaan. The famine is very severe there. We request permission to live in the land of Goshen." And Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Now that your family has joined you here, choose any place you like for them to live. Give them the best land of Egypt. The land of Goshen will be fine. And if any of them have special skills, put them in charge of my livestock too." Then Joseph brought his father Jacob and presented him to Pharaoh, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh. "How old are you?" Pharaoh asked him. Jacob replied, "I have lived for 130 hard years, but I am still not nearly as old as many of my ancestors." Then Jacob blessed Pharaoh again before he left. So Joseph assigned the best land of Egypt, the land of Ramesses, to his father and brothers, just as Pharaoh had commanded. And Joseph furnished food to his father and brothers in amounts appropriate to the number of their dependents. Joseph's leadership in the famine. Meanwhile, the famine became worse and worse, and the crops continued to fail throughout Egypt and Canaan. Joseph collected all the money in Egypt and Canaan in exchange for grain, and he brought the money to Pharaoh's treasure house. When the people of Egypt and Canaan ran out of money, they came to Joseph crying again for food. "Our money is gone," they said, "but give us bread. Why should we die?" "Well then," Joseph replied, "since your money is gone, give me your livestock. I will give you food in exchange." So they gave their livestock to Joseph in exchange for food. Soon all the horses, flocks, herds, and donkeys of Egypt were in Pharaoh's possession, but at least they were able to purchase food for that year. The next year they came again and said, "Our money is gone and our livestock are yours. We have nothing left but our bodies and land. Why should we die before your eyes? Buy us and our land in exchange for food. We will then become servants to Pharaoh. Just give us grain so that our lives may be saved, and so the land will not become empty and desolate." So Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh. All the Egyptians sold him their fields because the famine was so severe. Their land then belonged to Pharaoh. Thus, all the people of Egypt became servants to Pharaoh. The only land he didn't buy was that belonging to the priests, for they were assigned food from Pharaoh and didn't need to sell their land. Then Joseph said to the people, "See, I have bought you and your land for Pharaoh. I will provide you with seed so you can plant the fields. Then when you harvest it, a fifth of your crop will belong to Pharaoh. Keep 4/5 for yourselves and use it to plant the next year's crop and to feed yourselves, your households, and your little ones." "You have saved our lives," they exclaimed. "May it please you, sir, to let us be Pharaoh's servants." Joseph then made it a law throughout the land of Egypt, and it is still the law, that Pharaoh should receive 1/5 of all the crops grown on his land. But since Pharaoh had not taken over the priest's land, they were exempt from this payment. So the people of Israel settled in the land of Goshen in Egypt, and before long they began to prosper there, and their population grew rapidly. Jacob lived for 17 years after his arrival in Egypt, so he was 147 years old when he died. As the time of his death drew near, he called for his son Joseph and said to him, "If you are pleased with me, swear most solemnly that you will honor this, my last request. Do not bury me in Egypt. When I am dead, take me out of Egypt and bury me beside my ancestors." So Joseph promised that he would. "Swear that you will do it," Jacob insisted. So Joseph gave his oath, and Jacob bowed in worship as he leaned on his staff. Psalms 7. I come to you for protection, O Lord my God. Save me from my persecutors. Rescue me. If you don't, they will maul me like a lion, tearing me to pieces with no one to rescue me. O Lord my God, if I have done wrong or am guilty of injustice, if I have betrayed a friend or plundered my enemy without cause, then let my enemies capture me. Let them trample me into the ground. Let my honor be left in the dust. Arise, O Lord, in anger. Stand up against the fury of my enemies. Wake up, my God, and bring justice. Gather the nations before you. Sit on your throne high above them. The Lord passes judgment on the nations. Declare me righteous, O Lord, for I am innocent, O Most High, and the wickedness of the ungodly, but help all those who obey you. For you look deep within the mind and heart, O righteous God. God is my shield, saving those whose hearts are true and right. God is a judge who is perfectly fair. He is angry with the wicked every day. If a person does not repent, God will sharpen his sword. He will bend and string his bow. He will prepare his deadly weapons and ignite his flaming arrows. The wicked conceive evil. They are pregnant with trouble and give birth to lies. They dig a pit to trap others and then fall into it themselves. They make trouble, but it backfires on them. They plan violence for others, but it falls on their own heads. I will thank the Lord because he is just. I will sing praise to the name of the Lord Most High. Matthew 13. Story of the farmer scattering seed. Later that same day, Jesus left the house and went down to the shore, where an immense crowd soon gathered. He got into a boat where he sat and taught as the people listened on the shore. He told many stories such as this one. A farmer went out to plant some seed. As he scattered it across the field, some seeds fell on a footpath, and the birds came and ate them. Other seeds fell on shallow soil with underlying rock. The plants sprang up quickly, but they soon wilted beneath the hot sun and died because the roots had no nourishment in the shallow soil. Other seeds fell among thorns that shot up and choked out the tender blades. But some seeds fell on fertile soil and produced a crop that was 30, 60, and even 100 times as much as had been planted. Anyone who is willing to hear should listen and understand. His disciples came and asked him, "Why do you always tell stories when you talk to the people?" Then he explained to them, "You have been permitted to understand the secrets of the kingdom of heaven, but others have not. To those who are open to my teaching, more understanding will be given, and they will have an abundance of knowledge. But to those who are not listening, even what they have will be taken away from them. This is why I tell these stories, because people see what I do, but they don't really see. They hear what I say, but they don't really hear. They don't understand. This fulfills the prophecy of Isaiah, which says, 'You will hear my words, but you will not understand. You will see what I do, but you will not perceive its meaning. For the hearts of these people are hardened, and their ears cannot hear, and they have closed their eyes. So their eyes cannot see, and their ears cannot hear, and their hearts cannot understand, and they cannot turn to me and let me heal them.' But blessed are your eyes because they see, and your ears because they hear. I assure you, many prophets and godly people have longed to see and hear what you have heard and what you have seen and heard, but they could not. Now here is my explanation of the story I told about the farmer sowing grain. The seed that fell on the hard path represents those who hear the good news about the kingdom and don't understand it. Then the evil one comes and snatches the seed away from their hearts. The rocky soil represents those who hear the message and receive it with joy, but like young plants in such soil, the roots don't go very deep. At first they get along fine, but they wilt as soon as they have problems or are persecuted, because they believe the word. The thorny ground represents those who hear and accept the good news, but all too quickly the message is crowded out by the cares of this life and the lure of wealth, so no crop is produced. The good soil represents the heart of those who truly accept God's message and produce a huge harvest, 30, 60, or even 100 times as much as had been planted. Story of the wheat and weeds. Here's another story Jesus told him. The kingdom of heaven is like a farmer who planted good seed in his field, but that night, as everyone slept, his enemy came and planted weeds among the wheat. When the crop began to grow and produce again, the weeds also grew. The farmer's servants came and told him, "Sir, the field where you planted that good seed is full of weeds. An enemy has done it," the farmer exclaimed. "Shall we pull out the weeds?" they asked. He replied, "No, you'll hurt the wheat if you do. Let both grow together until the harvest. Then I will tell the harvesters to sort out the weeds and burn them and to put the wheat in the barn." Illustration of the mustard seed. Here's another illustration Jesus used. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed planted in a field. It is the smallest of all seeds, but it becomes the largest of garden plants and grows into a tree where birds can come and find shelter in its branches. Illustration of the yeast. Jesus also used this illustration. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast used by a woman making bread. Even though she uses a large amount of flour, the yeast permeated every part of the dough. Jesus always used stories and illustrations like those like these when speaking to the crowds. In fact, he never spoke to them without using such parables. This fulfilled the prophecy that said, I will speak to you in parables. I will explain mysteries hidden since the creation of the world. The wheat and weeds explained. The wheat and weeds explained. Then, leaving the crowds outside, Jesus went into the house. His disciples said, Please explain the story of the weeds in the field. All right, he said, I, the Son of Man, am the farmer who plants the good seed. The field in the world is the world, and the good seed represents the people of the kingdom. The weeds are the people who belong to the evil one. The enemy who planted the weeds among the wheat is the devil. The harvest is the end of the world, and the harvesters are the angels. Just as the weeds are separated out and burned, so it will be at the end of the world. I, the Son of Man, will send my angels, and they will remove from my kingdom everything that causes sin and all who do evil, and they will be thrown into the furnace and burn them. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth, and the godly will shine like the sun in their Father's kingdom. Anyone who is willing to hear should listen and understand. Illustration of the hidden treasure. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure that a man discovered hidden in a field. In his excitement, he hid it again and sold everything he owned to get enough money to buy the field and to get the treasure too. Illustration of the pearl merchant. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a pearl merchant on the lookout for choice pearls. When he discovered a pearl of great value, he sold everything he owned and bought it. Illustration of the fishing net. Again, the kingdom of the heaven is like a fishing net that is thrown into the water and gathers fish of every kind. When the net is full, they drag it up onto the shore, sit down, sort the good fish into crates, and throw the bad ones away. That is the way it will be at the end of the world. The angels will come and separate the wicked people from the godly, throwing the wicked into the fire. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Do you understand? Yes, he said, we do. Then he added, every teacher of religious law who has become a disciple in the kingdom of heaven is like a person who brings out of the storehouse the new teachings as well as the old. Jesus rejected at Nazareth. When Jesus had finished telling these stories, he left that part of the country. He returned to Nazareth, his hometown. When he taught there in the synagogue, everyone was astonished and said, Where does he get his wisdom and his miracles? He's just a carpenter's son. And we know Mary, his mother, and his brothers, James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas. All his sisters live right here among us. What makes him so great? And they were deeply offended and refused to believe in him. Then Jesus told them, A prophet is honored everywhere except in his own hometown and among his own family. And so he did only a few miracles there because of their unbelief.